All right, Saints fans and Hoodats from all over the world. This is Kyle T. Mosley. I'm here with Bob Rose of the Bayou Blitz, and we are ready to talk about Saints Texans recap as well as what to expect when the Saints head out to LA to face the Los Angeles Rams. So, stay tuned. Be ready. Get your pocketbooks on the side and pay us some money because we're going to give you some knowledge and drop some knowledge down to you in the Who Dat Nation, y'all. All right, Bobo, what's going on?
Not a lot, Mr. Mosley, and happy Wednesday, New Orleans Saints fans of the NFL, and especially fans of the Bayou Blitz. Kyle and I want to thank you again for joining us and having us into your homes and over your airways again on this wonderful Wednesday evening. Kyle, I am still exhausted. I feel like I'm the one that suited up and played on Monday night. That was an emotional roller coaster ride that thankfully ended in victory for the New Orleans Saints. But I'll tell you what, that has to be in the top 5, maybe higher, of regular season thrillers that we have seen the Saints come on top of. How about you?
Yeah, regular season as well as postseason, man. Think about it. Hello, Who Dat Nation. I forgot to say that. Look, man, that was a great win for the Saints. It's going to be one of those wins to help have them to spark some confidence, right? Not that they didn't have any, but it also is going to have me believing that Drew Brees is ready to really shine this season, to be in an MVP form as always. But you know, to come back, score 27 points in the second half, showed a lot of moxie. The score could have really been more lopsided on the Saints' favor. We're going to talk about that. We made a lot of mistakes, but first game, that's how it goes.
Yeah, for sure. First game mistakes for sure. We didn't see a lot out of the New Orleans Saints regulars during the preseason, and you and I both supported that strategy. But when you do that, things can be a little bit rocky in that first game. And from a penalty aspect, I thought the Saints played a pretty clean game, Kyle. But the thing that did concern me, well, 2 major things stood out. Now that the excitement of the game has worn off a little bit. Number one, red zone execution. Like you pointed out, Brees did make that horrendous decision and ended in an interception on the Texans goal line. And there was another opportunity where some play calling could be questioned when they were inside the Houston, I think it was 25-yard line, that led to a New Orleans field goal. And then obviously we would be remiss in not pointing out our continued concerns with the Saints secondary, particularly the deep coverage and deep communication when the game is on the line, and that almost cost them dearly Monday night.
The Saints secondary, we said it back in the summertime when we were previewing the Saints throughout training camp, the secondary is a liability. Okay? And what we saw was the secondary, I don't know if it was a lack of communication because I haven't replayed the game because I needed to chill. But
You're right.
To be honest with you, you've got to really be concerned about how the secondary did not play well in critical moments of the game. That's the concern I have. P.J. Williams, Marcus Williams, Marshawn, he gave up that last big one. He gave up a 10-yarder when he gave Hopkins a 10-yard cushion for the first score to extend that drive. He had a couple of mistakes there, right? But the way P.J. Williams lost his technique and got turned around without having any safety help, the first thing should have been on his mind, knowing that the post route is the more vulnerable route, right? So instead of him keeping his technique, Kenny Stills did a tremendous job to be able to turn him around and make it to the post, and he was open. Bob?
Sorry, Kyle. We broke up. Yeah, you're absolutely right about P.J. Williams, and he drives me crazy when I see him on the field. Marshawn Lattimore, I thought had a solid game. Definitely the best game among all of the Saints secondary members. I did like the way he battled DeAndre Hopkins, and Hopkins is going to make a lot of teams look foolish. He has throughout his career. He will continue to do so this season. He's easily in the top 3 or 4 of the top NFL wide receivers. So I was happy to see defensive coordinator Dennis Allen of the Saints try to lock up Lattimore on Hopkins whenever he could, try to lock up Lattimore on Hopkins whenever he could, and Lat battled him. And I thought he held his own. I'm not going to say he won that battle, but he definitely held his own. But you're right. The safety coverage, Marcus Williams on his interception, he played that ball brilliantly, and he showcased the athleticism that we all know he has, and the instincts that we all hope he recovers from his rookie season. But for the most part, I agree. He did struggle on the back end. Eli, you point out the cushion that Marshawn gave on Hopkins a couple of plays. Eli Apple continues to give an infuriating cushion. Eli doesn't react well. Even when the ball is, I get that Apple wants to keep the play in front of him. There's probably an instruction from the coaching staff as well. Keep the play in front of you, especially with struggles on the backside with the safeties. But if that's the way Apple is going to play, he has to react better or anticipate the play better to make some plays in front of him. Otherwise, we're going to continue to see the Saints give up a 10-yard pass on 3rd and 8 and things like that, like we did all night Monday night. And I know, I'm not the only Saints fan that was ready to pull out his or her hair whenever we saw that. So things just definitely need to be cleaned up on that back end.
Look, man, Eli Apple, who we think he is. Okay, he is number one. I think he's talented. I just think right now something mentally may not be clicking. Okay, and I'm not saying mentally like some people will say, "Oh, is he dumb?" No, I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you lose your confidence, and he's not playing with a lot of swag or bravado. He's not playing with that type of, I got this. I don't care who you put on me. I'm going to battle that person. I don't see those type of battles like you see Marshawn battling. Right? So, like Pro Football Focus had Marshawn Lattimore. They said the 38-yard pass that he gave up to Hopkins toward the end of the game. But the rest of the catches when Lattimore was guarding Hopkins as the primary receiver went only for 13 yards and that TD. So that meant Lattimore won. But what's missing in all of that as well were a couple of times. Well, one time I know Hopkins dropped the ball, and the other 2 times I think a safety was on him, and Eli Apple was on him another time. So, what I would say with the performance of the secondary is that it's going to be a growing performance, but I would have expected more because Marshawn's in his 3rd season. Eli Apple's his 5th season in the league?
4th or 5th, yeah.
Yeah. And both of you guys are first-round draft choices, right? Both of you played in big-time, the OU, or whatever y'all call yourselves, the Ohio State, right? And both of you guys are expected to play a lot better than what you're playing. That's my opinion. Because I think, all in all, man, like Marshawn Lattimore really stepped up to say it. He said that should not have happened. He said that last pass, that should not have happened, so that he knew that was on him. You know? The concern with Marcus Williams still, in my opinion, now when he did do the interception, that was kind of instinctive.
Yep.
You saw that, right? The way he tracked that ball, the way he went up and got to that ball. Now, what is not instinctive is his tackling. Man, what was he doing with Deshaun Watson? That's a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
You as big as Deshaun Watson, and you're going to go low, not even hit him? I was like, what is going on? How do you explain that one, Bob?
Well, and you know, you and I talked to a number of former players and some current, and whether they are offensive or defensive players, there does seem to be one constant from them, and that is this: with the severely reduced practice schedules during the preseason, that the top line players don't have an opportunity to tackle people.
Pass.
Because I mean,
no.
you don't want your star players hurt in training camp, and you know we've seen that before with the Saints. So I will give it a little bit of a pass and say, okay, this is rust to some extent. But Kyle, these guys have been playing football, organized football, since they were 8 and 10 years old.
That's where I'm coming from. That's why I've got to say, no, I can't give this a pass. They did a side-by-side photo. Someone did it on Twitter. Side-by-side photo of him going down against, putting his head down against Deshaun Watson, putting his head down against the Vikings receiver. Same approach, same. It's like he doesn't want any contact. If you are a National Football League safety, you're a hybrid between a defensive back and a linebacker. Yep. You've got to make that tackle, man.
Yeah, and this is what I'll say. And you and I'm not going to call us old. I'm going to be kind to us and say we're getting old.
Well, I'm seasoned. I'm well seasoned.
But we've had private conversations about this too. They don't teach, they being coaches or people that call themselves coaches, at the young levels of even high school or junior high school football. They don't do a good enough job of teaching fundamentals. And that has an upward trickle effect because, we see a player like Marcus Williams, and we've seen it, you referenced the Minneapolis play, but, we saw it a number of times last season too. He lowers his head. He can't see what he's about to hit, and therefore he's often out of position. You do see poor fundamental tackling throughout the league. It's not just the New Orleans Saints, folks. It's throughout the league. Players try to make these ESPN highlight reel hits, which, by the way, is going to get you flagged nowadays anyway. Just look, it's very simple. Watch what you're about to hit, wrap up, and bring your guy to the ground. That might not get you an ESPN highlight reel hit, but guess what? It'll help your team win a championship. And if it's me, I would much rather have a championship ring to show off than be on ESPN a couple times a year because I took a guy's head off with a poor fundamental tackle that's going to get me penalized and or fined anyhow.
Right.
I'll get off my soapbox now.
Right. Look, I didn't even. Let's say you kind of drive yourself into the man, right? Marcus Williams didn't even try to make contact. That's the problem I had. Okay, Deshaun Watson was leaping over him, and it was till the end. Then he made contact. Well, he already broke the plane. If you're the safety, your job is to make sure no one breaks the plane, right? On the touchdown pass that he gave up, why are you standing on the goal line? I know you're safety, but you're standing on the goal line. So therefore, a guy's momentum, if a quarterback is passing the ball to the receiver, his momentum is going to give him an advantage to be able to hit you and drive you back and get into the end zone. Point said, point done. Right? So that's what I'm saying. It's the football awareness. Man, look, it's just common sense. That's where I'm coming from, Bob. It just did not make sense how these guys were playing the football. Now, and I know a lot of guys will say, well, you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, well, if I don't know what I'm talking about, the stats show it, as well as the visuals showed it. You know, P.J. Williams, man, he's got to do a better job if he's going to be the guy filling in. And I think for that time they took him out and you saw Chauncey Gardner come in, right?
Yeah.
And Eli Apple, golly, you can't give up that play to Will Fuller. I mean, he was all on. Will Fuller made a great play on the ball still. But
yes, he
I'm
did.
surprised that the Texans didn't go back to him more often.
Yeah, I was too. I think, and it was obvious that DeAndre Hopkins was a big part of their offensive game plan, regardless of who the Saints were going to put on him. And I'm okay with that strategy. We see it. We see the Saints employ that strategy often with Michael Thomas. If you have one of the best players in the league, you're not going to care who is on him. You're going to feature him in your offensive game plan. So I do get that part. But on different broken plays, and hey, you got to give Deshaun Watson all the credit in the world. He is a wonderful athlete. And we'll get to the good parts of the game in a second. But Watson went down, was sacked 6 times on Monday night. It should have been about 9 or 10 if it wasn't for his athleticism. But on broken plays, your top option, or probably even your second option, that all goes out the window, folks. You're now ad-libbing everything. And that's where I was surprised that he didn't go to Fuller and or Stills when he was in the game a little bit more often. And that's part of that is the youth of Watkins. He is still an extremely young quarterback. He sort of locks in on his favorite target, which happens to be Hopkins. So he would force the ball to him on broken plays. Fortunate for the Texans that it didn't result in more turnovers other than the Marcus Williams interception. But yeah, I'm with you. I thought that Will Fuller would play a bigger part in the game, especially once we saw the Saints early on develop the strategy that, okay, wherever DeAndre Hopkins is going to line up, Marshawn Lattimore is going to line up across from him. I know if I'm the opposing offensive coordinator or coach, I'm looking to see, is number 26 on the field, because if P.J. Williams is in the game, that's where I'm throwing the ball. And if he's not, if it's more of a base alignment secondary, then I'm going to look for Eli Apple and who's lined up across from him, and then I'll probably go that direction before I would the direction of Marshawn Lattimore. But I mean, the Texans had loads of offensive talent, and they played well. It's a very distinct possibility that this team could go far. Through the AFC. The Saints were in a dogfight from the beginning, and all of us, when we predicted our scores last week, we did sort of predict a higher scoring game, and I think none of us had the Saints winning by any more than one score. So I don't think any of us were surprised to see such a close outcome. But hey, Kyle, you and I keep kind of bemoaning how the secondary played, especially down the stretch. There were a lot of good things that the Saints did in this football game, too.
A lot of good things were done by the Saints. I really believe that offensive line is outstanding, as always. I loved the attack from the defensive line play. They were able to get to Deshaun Watson often and also sack him 6 times, but also due to his ability to escape, I think they could have gotten to him 4 additional times to have 10 sacks.
Yep.
So all in all, I think the team performed well for the first game of the season. And I'm not saying because of the first game of the season we need to give them a bye for how they perform, but you've got to realize there are some kinks that most of the NFL teams, any team, when you just beginning the season, you're going to have to work those things out. But the halftime adjustments that Sean Payton as well as the coaching staff made were tremendous. To be able to come back, come out, score, and put 27 points in the second half was tremendous. Being down most of the game in your home environment, but the crowd also was there to support them. The Saints were able to net 510 yards of offense. There were 7 of 11 on third down, which is decent, not great for a Sean Payton team. The Saints were able to net 25 first downs. They had 65 offensive plays all in all, and they averaged 7.8 yards per play. If you look at the rushing game, that was the concern in the first half, but Alvin Kamara really picked it up. He really helped the Saints out. He had 97 yards off of 13 attempts. Latavius Murray, he had that big 30-yard touchdown. He didn't do too much after that. He only gained extra 13 yards for 43 yards. Taysom Hill had an additional 8 yards. His longest was 6 yards. So the Saints were able to put 148 rushing yards out there, right? Just think about what they can do once they get things gelling again, right? And I think Sean Payton was too pass heavy that first quarter at least, or should I say the first half. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree with you, and that was actually going to be one of my questions to you. Drew threw the ball 44 times in the game. He was sacked once, and performed magnificently, as we pointed out earlier. He completed 32 of his 43 pass attempts. But I was going to ask you if this seems like a long-term recipe for success for the way this Saints team is constructed now. To me, the answer is no. I know Drew can still capably throw the ball all over the field very well. He showed that Monday night against a very, very good Houston defense. But to me, I don't want my 40-year-old quarterback throwing the ball 40 or 45 times per week because I would prefer to save him where if my team has to do that to win, I would prefer it be in a December or January game. Whereas if he has to do this all year or every week all year long, there's certainly a greater chance that a 40-year-old arm could lose a little bit of pep than, say, a 25 or a 30-year-old arm. How do you feel?
Yeah. You have to think if the game plan was to test these defensive backs of the Texans, maybe to see how much pressure that they can actually put on them. And they did. They were able to move the ball, right? The first drive, I was kind of disappointed because we went in, really didn't do much of anything on the first drive and had to punt. So the concern goes back to this. Yeah, your third down efficiency was at 64%. The Saints are usually a 74 to 77% type of team, right? So we got to correct that. You've got to be able to mix in some of these run plays. The Saints only had 21 rushing plays. So You did average 7 yards per play, but remember, that was mostly due to the couple of chunk plays that Kamara had as well as that 30-yard play that that Murray had. So, I mean, you can see Sean has to either do one or two things. Trust that he has a new person in the style of Murray, right? Or you're going to have to add another running back to the equation. Okay.
And to your point, and we both expected the Saints to try to pressure that Texans secondary early on, most Saints games I tend to chart plays. Maybe not as specifically as some of those coaches up in the press box. But to your point, 9 out of the Saints' first 12 plays were run out of the shotgun. Now, not all 9 of those were passes, but they were spread the field. And when they would run the ball, it would be a draw play or a delay. So it was clear that they were trying to see early on how the Texans secondary would react to that kind of offense. But the thing that I wanted to ask you, Latavius Murray got 6 carries in the football game, and he finished with 43 yards. But to your point, he had that 30-yard touchdown run, which showcased everything that you and I like about Murray. Breaks through the line, outstanding burst in the open field. But do you expect, were you surprised at the lack of workload for Murray in general, and do you expect that to sort of increase as Coach Payton and that offensive coaching staff gets a little bit more comfortable with him?
Yes, I do. I think, again, remember my point was, does Sean trust him? He's going to have to be able to start to trust Murray. He's going to have to be able to say, I can't put too much on Alvin Kamara. Remember the first 4 games of last season, due to Mark Ingram's suspension, they had to feature Kamara quite heavily, right? And this season, I think Sean has to be able to say, what do I do with this tool? How can I use this tool? Can I trust this tool? See, I have my old handy drill that I go back to. I have 2 other drills, but I like my Black & Decker drill better than those other drills. So that's the one I go back to all the time, right? So the same thing with Murray and Alvin Kamara. Well, he knows what he has in Alvin Kamara, so that's why he kept going back to him, right? Murray wasn't hitting the hole at first all that well. Maybe also Murray has to be able to become acclimated to the offensive line. Is he going to trust the blacks being set up for him to be able to be patient enough to wait for those holes as well, right? And every team's defensive line is going to be different as well, So you look at the Rams, what you get from Aaron Donald, and I think they got a couple of new guys on that line, especially since Sue's departure, right? So what are you going to expect coming up in this game? Is it going to be a game to allow the New Orleans Saints to be more effective in the run? And if you look at how the Panthers utilize Metcalf, they're going to do Alvin Kamara is going to be just as effective, right? And I think also Murray can be as effective. So those 2 guys are going to be very critical for a Saints win coming up in L.A.
That's a beautiful segue, partner, into the big rematch. Week 2, Saints fans, Rams fans alike, have had this matchup circled on the calendar since the NFL schedule was announced, and I think it was probably late April, early May. But the rematch in LA, and to recap real quick, you sort of brought it up. The Rams are coming into this game also 1-0. They traveled east last week and beat Saints division rival, the Carolina Panthers, in Carolina by a score of 30-27. But like you and I were talking about before the show, Kyle, the Rams took advantage of some early Panthers mistakes and built a big lead. But down the stretch, I thought Carolina really outplayed them, certainly held the physical advantage. And you pointed out with Christian McCaffrey, he had a huge game against that Rams defense, something that we have seen out of Alvin Kamara against the Rams the last 2 or 3 times. 3 times these teams have met, really. So it'll be interesting to see how that Rams defense plays both Kamara and Thomas, who has also been a thorn in their side.
Yeah, you got to look at this Rams defense. I believe is a little suspect in my mind, and the same thing can be said about the Saints defensive backs. Don't get me wrong, right? But Sean Payton is going to be able to take advantage of some of these matchups. If Christian McCaffrey was able to get 10 receptions, 81 yards in receiving, I'm pretty sure Alvin Kamara is going to do pretty well. I'm pretty sure Thomas is going to do well. I'm pretty sure Ted Ginn may have an opportunity to do well as well. Okay? So here's the critical point. Christian McCaffrey was able to gash them for 128 yards on 19 attempts. And he scored twice. And one of those touchdowns kind of resembled how Alvin Kamara, with the balance and the strength, Christian McCaffrey willed his way to be able to go across the goal line to stretch the ball out against the Rams. So what I'm saying is this. Carolina did make some mistakes. Carolina did not really play their best football because Cam Newton turned it over once. They had a couple of fumbles. DJ Moore had a fumble. Cam Newton lost a fumble as well. So, I mean, those are 3 turnovers right there, man. Right there. That they gave 3 opportunities for Goff and those guys to take advantage of them. But as you said, the defense of the Rams allowed Carolina to get back into the game, and the score was 30-27, right? Kind of similar to what the Saints game was, right? So I'll say this. A lot of kinks on their end because I didn't think the Rams' offense was that great. Ty Gurley, up until the end of the game, that's when he started pouring it on. He came away with 97 yards, all for 14 attempts. The young man Brown, who really was running the ball very well that first half for the Rams, he had 53 yards on the field as well. Goff, he was okay. He only put out 186 yards passing, 1 interception, 1 TD. He was 23 of 39, and he only had a quarterback rating of 69. That wasn't one of his best performances, Not one of their receivers went over 100 yards. Robert Woods was at 70. Kupp was at 46. Cooks was at 39, all for 2 receptions. So are we going to say the Rams are not going to try to take advantage of the Saints? Because I believe these 2 teams kind of know each other now, right? And there's a lot of bad blood between these guys. There's some respect for Donald. There's some respect for Breeze. But in our hearts, we knew we should have been in that Super Bowl, and we knew that we would have put up more than just 3 points. Okay, so I think Sean Payton's going to go out there with some determination to show the national audience, because it's going to be a 3:30 game, right, on Fox, that we should have been there. And I believe this team is going to be ready to be able to prove that.
Yeah, I think so too. If you're going to give either of these 2 teams an edge in the motivation category, which kind of sort of means squat this early in the season, but I would definitely agree that the Saints have the edge in the motivation. But you're right; these 2 teams, they played each other twice last season. Once the year before in 2017 in Los Angeles. It was another hard-fought. Hard-fought, very close game.
Sure was.
So these 2 teams, and they don't have, the 2 players from each squad, they don't hesitate to trash talk each other either. Not only on the field, but we see a lot of back and forth in social media, and it's already started on Twitter. I know you've seen it too.
Yeah. And Lattimore is holding his own with those boys. I like it.
Yep. But let me throw out a stat to you, Kyle. Jared Goff has only thrown for over 300 yards. First of all, he's thrown for less than 225 yards in 7 of his last 9 games, counting week 1 and all 3 postseason games last year. And of those 9 games, he's only thrown for over 300 yards 2 times. Now, those 2 times happen to be against our New Orleans Saints. But there's a lot of mumbling throughout Rams land. That Goff is definitely, at the very least, he's in a funk and seems to be a little bit skittish under pressure. And you just read his stat line down from last week. He threw the ball 39 times and completed the ball 23. Now we know what kind of stars and big play threats the Rams have in that receiving core, but for 23 completions, he only had 186 yards. Is this former high draft choice more of a game manager, or is he still a threat to beat you?
Give him some time. And if you give him time back there, I didn't see Carolina pressuring him much, but I didn't see him executing as well, right? And the numbers speak to that. They gave Goff, a 4-year extension, and I believe it's worth $134 million, right? So if I have a guy that I'm giving $134 million, and this is the guarantee, which just is mind-boggling. $110 million of that is guaranteed.
Yeah.
You need to be throwing that ball down the field as far, as wide, and as many times as you can. Now, here's the problem with the Rams. The Rams have small wide receivers.
Yep.
Okay? And maybe, just maybe, we'll see after this game against the Saints, people are figuring how to handle those guys. Cooks, we know he can burn you for a long one. Kupp is a great possession guy. Injuries have hampered his career the past couple of seasons. They did target him 10 times. He did have 7 receptions, but he only picked up 46 yards, and his longest reception was only 10 yards. Okay? Mm-hmm. Robert Woods, his longest reception of that game was 22 yards. Cooks, his longest was 24 yards. And he only had 39 yards total. So he really didn't do much of anything, right? So then you look at the tight ends, Higbee, Everett, right? Those guys didn't do as much as, and he did not utilize those tight ends as much as he did last season and the season before that. So that could be one of those, is he missing something? Is he missing a guy that he needs to have as a security blanket? I don't think Higbee and Everett are those guys that he's going to trust at tight end. That's who used to bail him out. I mean, the tight ends really bailed him out in that playoff game against us, so I hesitate to say that anybody in the league, when you play to if you make the squad, you're doing something right. So the talent is there, the ability is there. A lot of times how these kids are playing, and I'm much older guy, so kids are playing, is because that it's a mental thing, just like with Eli Apple I spoke of. It's something mental going on. Might be something mental with Goff. We just don't know. We'll see.
It could be. Yeah, it could be. And as many weapons as this Rams offense has, when you watch them, they aren't like the St. Louis Rams team of, I guess it's pushing 20 years ago now, the greatest show on turf with Marshall Faulk and Kurt Warner, Torrey Holt, and all those guys. They attack you down the field. This Rams team, and other than the size of their receivers, they attack you a lot of the same ways that Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints offense does. They'll attack you through the intermediate zones. They love to run Woods and Cup, especially on these crossing patterns.
Right.
A lot of times, and Quinn Early, Joe Horn, I love you, but don't call them rub routes. They're pick plays. Let's call them for what they are. Yeah, and that's how they free up their receivers. They like Goff to get the ball in these guys' hands while they're on the move, and let them make plays with their legs. And more often than not, in the last two years or so, we've seen a lot of success out of that. I'd have to turn on, and I'm a little bit late in the week in trying to get my matchup articles done through Canal Street Chronicles. But I definitely want to watch the Rams offense a little bit closer, because I'm curious how other defenses have played them, over these last 8 or 9 games, like we just pointed out, to see if they're playing a softer zone, to let these Los Angeles wideouts make the catch in front of them and then bring them down, because that would be a good indicator of why Goff isn't throwing for the big yardage totals, despite a lot of completions. And if that's the case, if New Orleans or other teams that have had success against the Rams, if they are playing in off coverage and just making the play and keeping everything in front of them, then like you pointed out at the beginning of the segment, Kyle, the key for the New Orleans Saints defense is to not A, make the tackle, but B, get heavy pressure on Goff without having to blitz to do it. Would you agree with that strategy going into this game?
Yeah, and I believe with Demario Davis as well as Anzalone, they're going to have to be very weird. How do I say this? They're going to have to really be aware what's going to happen with those tight ends. Now, maybe the Carolina linebackers played the tight ends a little bit more in their face, and that's where they were kind of limited there, right? But Demario Davis does such a great job rushing and being able to recognize the rushing plays that are coming out and being a part of that. I think his duty will be more, how do I contain the guys out of the backfield? How will I be able to handle Gurley, I think you're going to see a heavy dose of the Rams trying to control that defensive line against the Saints early on, right? Let's pound them a little bit. Let's see if Big O is if he's back and he's ready to go up for the challenge. You got Brown, those guys, and hopefully we can get Edwards back from the hamstring injury. So, because you could tell Lowen at times he wasn't ready for the big stage on Monday night. He made a critical error, but that's expected of these young talents. My concern is the defensive backfield, as always, not being able to give up the big plays, because they are going to be the ones attacked more than the intermediary routes, in my opinion. Okay? I believe they're going to test Eli Apple. They're going to test P.J. Williams.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not P.J., please put Gardner in. And if they're going to test him to see how he handles the pressure. So that's where the big tests are going to be, right there. The Saints have to do something. They can't allow Goff to just stand back. And you saw it with Deshaun Watson. When he was given more than 3 seconds, he hurt the Saints. But when he got pressure in his face under 2 seconds, that's when the Saints were able to do a little bit more damage. So let's see how the Dennis Allen defense is able to attack. Has Aaron Glenn done enough to help Eli Apple and PJ and whomever else other than Marshawn Lattimore be able to handle the technique side? those are the issues that need to be addressed with the defense.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I also think that if Dennis Allen of the Saints goes into this game with the Rams with a game plan of we're just going to line up and play him man for man and blitz Goff, I think that could spell disaster for them because of the type of big play receivers. I don't mind mixing it up, and you know my philosophy. If you have a guy like Marshawn Lattimore, for instance, I want him to get up in the face of a receiver and get physical and cover him all over the field. But we just pointed out a little bit ago how the Rams like to run these crossing patterns and a lot of quick slants. I'll be interested to see how much Allen will mix up his coverages and how Goff will respond to that. As far as the Rams' strategy of wanting to control the line of scrimmage with Gurley in that running game, I couldn't agree with you more, especially when they turn on the film of this past Monday's game and sees that the Houston Texans running backs. I know Watson had 40 yards on the ground himself, but Carlos Hyde and Duke Johnson combined for about 140 yards on the ground just with those two. And Kyle, that I know that the Saints were missing Rankins and will continue to do so over the next month at least, and missing Onyemata for this game. But the production of the Houston running backs on Monday night surprised and disappointed me a little bit.
Well, Carlos Hyde is a good running back.
Mm-hmm.
Carlos Hyde, I believe in his career, averages over 5 yards per carry, if I'm not mistaken. I need to go back and look at those stats. I recall when he was with the 49ers how well he ran the football. Then went to Cleveland, how well he ran the football. The Saints' defensive line did not, that first half especially, they didn't do as well as I thought that they should have done, being more disciplined, right? I think Davenport allowed, Watson to get out onto the corner and be able to score, right? Because he was crashing inside and focusing more on the running back. So that goes to the coaching side or the football awareness side. If you know you have a mobile quarterback, you shouldn't be crashing down heavy to try to tackle. That was his fault, right? But I think all in all, Davenport didn't have an outstanding game, but he didn't have a poor game either. I mean, he made some tackles. He performed very well. So I'm more concerned how the discipline will be for the defensive ends. Will Cam Jordan be so aggressive that Gurley will have an opportunity to get outside for, let's say, a swing pass here or there, right? As well as Davenport or Trey Hendrickson. Will they allow those screen passes to develop right in front of them? Those are the things that we really need to pay attention of, how the Rams are going to counter the Saints' aggression on the lines as well as in the linebacking core.
Yeah, absolutely. And my eyes are going to be on the interior line battles as well. I thought Shy Tuttle, the rookie undrafted free agent for the Saints, I thought he played extremely well, better as the game progressed on Monday night. We know Malcolm Brown was brought into New Orleans primarily to be a run stopper, so that's his forte. And I'm really excited to have Onyemata back in the lineup, even if he doesn't log a heavy snap count, and I don't know what his conditioning is like. Just to have that talented young man on the field, because when the Rams run Gurley, it's usually very similar to the Saints rushing attack. They like to run off guard. There's quick hit plays to get Gurley quickly onto the second level, where his talents and instincts will take over. Well, if the Saints win the interior battle with those defensive tackles and play disciplined on the ends, Cam, Davenport, Trey Hendrickson, that's going to eliminate those holes and sort of stonewall that Rams rushing attack, which will hopefully, it's hard to believe that we're talking about the potential of a Rams offense with Todd Gurley being one-dimensional, but that's how to do it, is win those inside battles.
Inside battles are going to be highly important. I think Big O is going to make his presence felt. I liked when the Saints went to the NASCAR package and they were able to put Davenport inside. He was able to help out and do some contain then. But I don't fear the Rams' offensive attack any longer. And like I said, it wasn't until late in the game is when Gurley started really to pick up the pressure on those guys, but it was also due to the Panthers' lack of being able to. They were being a lot aggressive. They was trying to get to Goff, so that opened things up for Gurley. So those are the things that we're just going to have to pay attention to, how these linebackers are going to support those guys. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, A.J. Klein is going to be critical. If he's going to be on the field, he's got to be more instinctive. I'm just kind of concerned with Klein. I think he's a step behind. I may be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but it's ever since last season, Bob, just seemed like he's just a hair behind at times.
And that's hard to disagree with you, but remember, we're comparing A.J. Klein in the Saints defense to Demario Davis and Alex Anzalone, two superior athletes, two players, Anzalone and Davis, that play with outstanding instincts and feel for the game. Klein just doesn't hold a candle to either one of those, if you ask me. Doesn't mean he's a bad linebacker, but if you line up the three Saints linebackers in a row, you have to label the Klein as that A.J. Klein would be the weakest link. Do you think, as long as Kiko Alonso is up to speed, do you think his natural abilities are a better fit for the Saints defense and that linebacking core than what A.J. Klein's are?
I don't know. I didn't really pay attention to Alonso's contribution in this game because I think he was in on a few plays here and there, but he wasn't heavily involved because he may not know the playbook as well, right?
Right.
Alonso is a interesting young man because, yes, he has great football knowledge. He has great football instincts. He's not a very big linebacker, but I think he's a highly capable linebacker, right? So if I compared him to where AJ is now in his career, I think he has a slight edge due to the speed factor, right? As well as his instincts. So knowing Sean Payton, he's going to stay with AJ unless somebody really shows him that AJ needs to sit on that bench a little bit more, and Mike Nolan as well. I think AJ is going to be there, could Alonso come in and make a few plays to have them turn in their heads? Yeah, it's possible. I just don't know if that challenge is going to be right now, this game coming up. It might be in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Kyle, let's jump to the offensive side of the ball, though. We know that the key to beating the Rams defense is at least controlling Aaron Donald along the line of scrimmage. And I don't think you or I would disagree with each other when we say that the Saints offensive line has the capabilities, maybe more so than anybody else, to at least contain Donald. You expect him to make a couple of plays. That's just who he is. Where do you see the vulnerability in this Rams defense, and how would you attack it if you're Coach Sean Payton and Pete Carmichael?
It would have to be the middle and to the right. That's where. And Aaron Donald is a phenomenal player. Now, let's just get this straight. He's probably the best defensive lineman we have seen in the past 10 to 15 years. The thing about him is you're still able to run at him. And I think the Saints missed an opportunity in the playoffs when they chose not to run at him that final drive, So when you run away from him, his pursuit is so good. You ever notice that? I mean, he's able to really get to a guy, break through that line and track down. He did it to Kamara a couple of times, and I remember him doing it to Ingram as well. So running at him, it might be the key, Bob, instead of running away. Now that I think it out.
No, I agree with you, because even in the regular season victory that the Saints had over the Rams, they had more success running at Aaron Donald with inside runs to Alvin Kamara. Now, I know Kamara isn't your prototypical big thumper between the tackles, but we know that he can pick up yardage. And that's what and Ingram had a good game against Los Angeles when the two played in the regular season as well. But it did surprise me. Not that they ran at Donald, but they didn't hesitate to do it even with Kamara. And much like Gurley, for the Rams, when Kamara, if Kamara gets a hole, it doesn't matter whether it's over guard or off tackle. Once you get Alvin onto that second level, that's when his superior athletic ability takes over, and he has he can then take advantage of, in what my opinion is, a gross mismatch that favors him against the Los Angeles linebackers. So I do think that if they can have some success running at Aaron Donald or even Dante Fowler at defensive end, who's a wonderful pass rusher and can give these Saints problems, Fowler is not much of a run defender. So they can have success running against either one of those guys and get Kamara to that second level where I think he can make some big plays.
Yeah. You always attack a bully straight on. You always attack the strength of a big man right into his gut. So you don't run away from the big man. You got to hit him high, hit him low, and hit him in that gut. Knock some wind out of him time and time again. And when they did the first game last season, you saw his frustrations crop in as a result. He wasn't able to get there. Now, look, I was looking at the stat line. Aaron Donald, of course, what's in between the stat line is the pressures and everything. But Aaron Donald only had one tackle and one combined tackle against the Carolina Panthers. So he wasn't a major factor.
No, and that was, if I'm not mistaken, that was a very similar stat line to what he had in the regular season matchup between these two last year. Andrus Peat and Max Unger did a phenomenal job on Aaron Donald during the regular season, and even did a pretty solid job against him in the playoffs too. So it's going to be a big test for rookie center Eric McCoy, who had his hands full with Texans defensive tackle DJ Reader on Monday night. McCoy, it's not that McCoy played badly, but Reader was able to make some plays, and Reader's a good player, but he's no Aaron Donald. So that matchup does have me a little bit concerned on Sunday evening.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Donald, Pete is either going to get help from Armstead or he's going to get help from or help out McCoy, right? I think what's interesting about this Rams team, and you look at how they're composed, it's just like Clowney being missing from the Texans, and you saw how limited and neutralized Watt was, right? When he went against a very outstanding right tackle. Let's get that right. Ramczyk handled his business. Do you think it is that Donald is missing Sue?
No, not entirely anyway. I mean, obviously, when you have a talent like Ndamukong Suh on any defensive front, that's going to make everybody better around you. But we saw Aaron Donald put up all-world type of numbers before Sue. Uh, so I expect him to continue to be a handful for whomever he plays. But the fact that you don't have Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh lining up shoulder to shoulder certainly benefits the interior of the New Orleans Saints line and helps set up that interior pass pocket for Drew Brees. I do like that, man. Despite the fact that it's Aaron Donald, I'll take my chances with Pete, the skills of Eric McCoy, and Larry Warford. I'll take 3 against 1 no matter who that one is any day of the week.
Right. Well, we'll see. But when Donald was kind of, like you say, all world, he did have some help still with Brockers and those guys back then. So I think, second game of the season, I think the NFL made a bad choice of putting the Saints and the Rams so early in the season. They could have capitalized on this toward the end of the season with some big ratings. But anyway, when we look at what's going to happen against the Rams, I think the Saints are well set, except what the major concern for me is not anybody but those defensive backs. Which defensive backfield is going to show up on Sunday? So let's see how the Saints are going to perform there. Saints fans, the Saints go into this game. They are a 3-point underdog, if I'm not mistaken, due to what Vegas sets as their line. How do you see it, Bob?
I see it being yet another close matchup between these two teams. The regular season game last year, I think, was 45-35, while the NFC Championship game was much lower scoring. Each defense played much better, and we know about the Saints' missed opportunities in the red zone this time around. I do expect Sean Payton and the Saints team to have a major chip on their shoulder even as they enter enemy territory. Look, Mr. Jim Everett, we love you, and we know what you do for the city of LA and for that Rams franchise. But I don't consider the Rams to have nearly the home field advantage that exists, say, in New Orleans if this game were to be played there. So I don't think the Saints are afraid of have any hesitation about going on the road and playing well. The turf in the LA Coliseum, or whatever they're calling it, is a fast track, which benefits both offenses. So I think that the Saints will be able to put up not only some yards, but they're not going to miss those red zone opportunities, squander those red zone opportunities like we saw last week, or even in the last matchup against LA. So I do see this being a higher scoring affair. And even though I'm waiting and I expect the plays, the Rams have entirely too much talent on that offense to hold them down on the scoreboard as well. So, Kyle, I can see this game being played probably in the high 20s or low 30s. I think the benchmark for a victory is going to be around 31 points. But I do expect it to be a close game. Probably within the 3-point spread, but I'm going to lean towards the New Orleans Saints victory on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, well, the two teams have met. They have battled 76 times in their history. The Rams lead the series 42-34 against the Saints. The last time the Saints visited the L.A. area, they lost by 6 points, 20-26. And we know what happened last year. Those guys split between the two of them. So the Rams, even when they were in St. Louis, it was quite contentious. Sometimes we'll go out there heavy favorites and lose, and like that game last year, we were kind of evenly matched with those guys, and it was going to say who's going to be the big dog in the NFC. Saints came away with the win. My only concern is health, making sure that the Saints come away healthy because we have a quick turnaround and these guys are staying out in the West because they have to play Seattle the following week. So let's make sure it's going to be a good, clean game for the Saints. Make sure that whatever we do, let's perform to our best of ability. And I think the game plan should be, let's see how Kamara are able to attack and rush against the Saints. Against the Rams. And Taysom Hill, man, I'm just going to say this. I know he scored the touchdown. I think the Saints need to utilize him a little bit more down the field. That's all I'm going to say against that Rams secondary. The Rams secondary could have been carved up if they had a better quarterback. I'm not saying Cam Newton's not a good quarterback. I think he's not Drew Brees. That's all I'm saying. All right. So I have these guys, the Saints 27, Rams 24. So that's my pick for the game. All right. One other note, Bobo. I know last night the WWL family had some contentious tweet out there. I'm going to let them handle that within their family. I'm just saying, Seth, hang in there, buddy. That's all I would say there. Okay? And Antonio Brown is bringing more drama to the NFL with his latest accusation of sexual impropriety on his part. So we shall see what happens there. They had a couple of major neck injuries that occurred on this past weekend. Let's pray for those young men. One young man out in Oakland, Mosley as well. He was carted off the field. A lot of carting off the field and people getting hurt, especially the clavicles. Did you notice that Foles had a clavicle injury? Tyreek Hill had one. And I think some other guy had a clavicle injury. Man, that was strange.
Yeah, very strange. But Kyle, I got to say I'm disappointed. We went 66 minutes without mentioning my friend Antonio Brown. I thought we were going to escape the show, but you had to go and do it.
Well, look, somewhere Mike Tomlin is just sitting back and enjoying, man. That's what I have to believe. Mike Tomlin is like, thank you, we escaped. Look, they gave up draft picks, major draft picks, to get this guy. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, he played them. He played the Steelers. He played the Raiders to get what he wanted. He played them, So, anyway, we've got to talk about this, Bob. The NFC South, the Falcons, the Panthers, and the Bucks all went down. What's going on with Jameis Winston?
I really don't know. I thought that we could potentially see some big things out of Winston this year, given the coaching style and offensive prowess of Bruce Arians when they brought him in. Now, it's only week one, folks, so we could still definitely see a turnaround. We've seen it countless times from the Saints after having a clunker in the season opener. But with all the weapons that Winston has in that Tampa Bay offense at the skill position, you definitely expect him to, take care of the ball better, which has been a recurring problem throughout his career. But that young man just doesn't seem to get it. Yeah, he has all the physical talent in the world. Yeah, and we saw that at Florida State. We've seen flashes of it in his Buccaneers career, but I don't know, and I don't know the Tampa Bay circle well enough, and I certainly don't know Jameis Winston. But it seems to me, as an outsider's view, that he doesn't seem to want to put in the work, and I mean the film study work to get better. His defensive recognition seems poor, which is part of the reason why he continues to make mistakes. And I will tell you this one. I know a little bit about Bruce Arians from his time in Pittsburgh. He won't put up with this. Forget not re-signing Jameis to a contract after the season. He'll bench his butt. Even if it does cost him some games. But as far as the rest of the NFC South, Irv Smith Sr., congratulations. Irv Smith Jr. and his Minnesota Vikings wiped the turf with our friends in Atlanta. So we wish you continued good luck. But yeah, the Saints sitting on top of the NFC South after Week 1. I kind of chuckled to myself throughout Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, I was looking at that game, man, and the Minnesota Vikings are going to be a team to really watch. Look, these guys put up 28 points, but Kirk Cousins only threw the ball 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
10 times. That's it. 10 times. And they beat the brakes off these dudes, man. Atlanta only scored, was it the third and fourth quarters? Or was it just the fourth quarter?
I think it might have just been the fourth quarter because I know Minnesota had that game well in hand.
Yeah, that's what's – and Ryan, I saw 2 of those picks, and I was just like, what was he thinking? Really? That's what I wouldn't say concern. It makes me happy, but look, Calvin Ridley nor Julio Jones was the number 1 receiver. It was Hooper. Who? Yeah, Hooper. Hooper, he had 77 yards, 9 catches, 77 yards, man. Look, that kid Ridley, they got to feature him more, man. I know they just gave Julio 33 mil a year, 55 mil a year, whatever it is. 22 mil a year for that $66 million extension. But man, I'm still kind of bewildered at that performance. I think a lot of people in Atlanta are bewildered and believing that the offensive line woes are going to be cured, but the offensive line looks like that same offensive line, man. They can even run the ball, man. So I know each game is different. Each tone of the game can be different, but that was, to me, the more surprising performance from our opponents in the NFC South. Okay? All right. Bobo, tell everybody how they can find you on the World Wide Web.
Well, folks, we want to thank you for listening and tuning in to Kyle and I again this week. As far as following me, I can be followed on Facebook. Look for Bob Rose, or Twitter at BobbyR2613. The majority of my writings come through the wonderful publication of the Canal Street Chronicles, which can be found on Facebook, or Twitter at SaintCSC. And like I said earlier in the show, I'm going to be previewing this matchup on both sides of the ball with the Rams as we wind out our week, so stay tuned for that. Please give our Facebook page a follow as well, the Bayou Blitz Facebook page. Saw a lot of great interactions throughout the weekend, the first big weekend of football, and certainly throughout the Monday night Saints-Texans game. So we want to keep that love going. Thank you for everybody that contributes through that group. It seems like you guys have a lot of fun, which is why Kyle and I set up that group in the first place. And use it as a forum for us, too. If you have any suggestions or questions about our show, it is a group that's geared towards the show specifically. So if you have anything to ask Kyle and I or suggest to us, trust me, we're all ears. We try to be as interactive as we can. But thank you for all the support and love that you guys show to us as well.
Definitely. And don't forget that I'm going to steal Bob in a couple of weeks from the Canal Street Chronicle so he can write several articles for us. Hint, hint. Nah, John, ain't nothing but love, man. Barry Hursters, give him some shout-outs at the SaintsNewsNetwork.com webpage. Barry's put up an article today about the performance of Ramczyk and facing the Rams coming up. So check Barry Hursters at www.saintsnewsnetwork.com. Also, you can be able to follow us online at saintspodcast.com, and you can check out us on social media at Saints News for Twitter, Instagram, as well as Facebook. All right, Bobo, you guys have a good one. See you next week. We'll be on the air Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on next Wednesday night. Saints fans and Who-Dats from all over the world, you have a great evening, a fantastic Sunday when the Saints bring home a win from L.A. Saints fans, Who-Dat, baby. Take care.
Yes.